think we've got enough to start. So welcome everyone. Thank you for coming to our first webinar in the Insurtech UK Tech Learning Series. We've got one every Wednesday in November at 2 p.m. and the first one is our build versus buy debate. If everyone who's not on the panel could just keep yourselves on mute, that would be much appreciated. And any questions that you have throughout the webinar, if you just want to put them in a chat feature, and then our panelists will kind of look at them as they discuss and pick up on any that is kind of relevant to what they're talking about at that time. And we can definitely go to questions at the end as well. But yeah, I'll hand over to our chair, who is James York.
Hello everyone and welcome. Apologies for my croaky voice. Today is election day in Insurtech UK. Forget the US election, the ballots are going in right now for the AGM this afternoon. I've been on Zoom call after Zoom call hustling for votes, as you can imagine, where 11 people are going for 9 spots. But I'm delighted today to chair the build versus buy debate, which is in support of Salesforce and their fantastic partnership with Insurtech UK as one of our first partners. And I can tell you, when we did a practice run through of this, it turned into a full-blown debate all in itself. So without further ado, I'll introduce the panelists and introduce a theme, which I think is really important and going to trigger some debate. So I'm joined today by Anthony Malata from Salesforce, the Director of Enterprise Architecture, Guy Farley, founder and CTO of Bought by Many, Matthew Daltis, Head of Data at ULife, Pete Goodman, CEO at Ventus Platform, and Charlie Blackburn, CTO and co-founder at Azure. So in my view, to kick off the debate, I want to theme this conversation around ambition. We're talking about build versus buy. Well, let's play red team for a second here. It obviously is in the interest of those that are selling software to say buy. And it's in the interest of Insurtech that is looking to build valuation and a startup that's looking to create waves and ripples to be able to say it's creating and building something unique and has an edge. So ultimately, does this all boil down to the ambition of the company in question, whether they're incumbent or trying to become Insurtech or a startup in their own right, or the scope of where they're looking to get to in their own strategy? And I think I'd like to introduce Charlie's view on this to begin with. Charlie, is this a matter of pride for Insurtech, or is it pragmatism in terms of where you begin and where you want to end up?
I'm not sure it's pride, right? This stuff's far too hard. Where those are kind of the dominant emotions, as a classic on the fence, I'm both a build and buy. The thing I think is important that we talked about is culture. And one of the things obviously you get when you build that is super important is that sense of ownership. These businesses are hard. They're really hard. We all know this. It doesn't matter what kind of insurer you are or what Insurtech. And you really need that ownership and that commitment, and you get a lot of that from really feeling you own and you build your own technology.
Fantastic, and let's go straight to the other side of the fence here. Pete, from the build perspective, you've got an interesting case study, so tell us a little bit about your journey to being a software creator and why you think the buy is a really useful strategic choice for startups.
Yeah, sure. So firstly, thanks for having us today. I started a journey probably 6 years ago to build an insurance business and decided to build everything, the entire tech stack. And it was quite the journey, to be honest. And what we realized during that is that we were actually connecting into a lot of different platforms, and we kind of ended up realizing that what we'd built was probably more valuable than the product that we'd built on top of it at that point. So the product had evolved over time from a home insurance product to what it is now, and it's now owned by another, which they've done some great improvements on it. But realistically, when we were looking at it, if we go back to the starting point of when we wanted to take that journey up, it was a really expensive test case to find out whether or not the product in the current guise was going to be good enough. And distribution is expensive enough, and product creation is hard enough. To build everything from an intricacy perspective to deliver that product, whether it be the distribution side, policy admin, or claims, whatever it may be, I just feel that software has changed in the way that it's used now, and it's much more connected than it's ever been. And I think that people are just much more frightened nowadays of they've kind of been stung on either side of that fence, and so they resort to the other, is what I've seen. We took a long time getting to where we got to with Home Life, but then came out the back end with this great platform of Ventus. So you you know, we'll get cool geniuses later, but at the time, it was probably a bit madness to build that much stuff, if I'm honest, looking back. But at the time, Insurtechs weren't really that prominent from a software perspective. There was a lot of sort of product creation and distribution opportunities being done from, you know, actual insurance perspectives. But now I think that Insurtechs are much more geared towards providing the technology themselves as a buy option, way more than they were when I started the journey. And I think it should be considered at every point, really. And I think to be honest, I think you'd be mad building from the ground up, if I'm completely honest.
I think that's a really fascinating point, and I'd like to bring in Guy here for a second. Guy, obviously, from a startup perspective, Pete's just mentioned his business built a full stack that's now able to operate in isolation as a brand new business, effectively, to other Insurtechs, MGAs, and incumbents. Is it wise then to start building? Tell us about the BBM approach to things out of the box from day one. Have you been building, or have you been, you know, using other software tools pragmatically?
Yeah, so BBM started life as a sort of group buying business model, and we built the initial website ourselves, you know, as a membership site with redirects out to the insurers to buy policies from others. And at that point, you know, build was entirely practical. And then we shifted into putting our own pet insurance products in, and we had to make a choice at that stage, and we didn't have experience as a full stack provider at that point, and we used IB Suite from IBA to get us product one off the ground. But even at that point, we knew that we really wanted to move outside of the restrictions of a platform, and so we wrapped it very heavily in our own API, and all the web front end stuff talks via our API to that platform. And then we have moved further and built the rest of that stack as we launched the business into Sweden, and we're looking at the US at the moment. In fact, we just got our first few licenses in the US, and we'll be using entirely our own product stack in the US as well. Like, I think for the why build, as I guess that's really we've done that, so I should defend it. I think firstly, it creates us as a tech organization. Having a large tech presence and capability within the business gives you a different mindset as a company, I think. So there's definitely a cultural part to that. I think it allows us to believe that we can be flexible into different areas of business. So for example, we're just moving everything into monthly subscription model, and we're launching a wellness product in the US. And so that product isn't an insurance product, but we can put that into our platform because it's our platform. And then it is also definitely viewed as an asset, that platform. So we are venture funded. We've just closed Series C. In more than one of those investment rounds, investors have said to me, you know, we like this asset as part of your business, and that's a part of that investment decision for us. So those are the reasons we've taken that route.
Yeah, and I guess the key thing here, Anthony, is cost as well for me. We should throw that one in straight away. For a platform like Salesforce, can a startup with, really seed stage funding or grassroots level funding, friends, family and fools, afford to buy? Should they build? Is building cheaper, and does it give them more agility? Let's what's the kind of startup demographic of a Salesforce customer, and how does that play in, and how should they plan to engage? Is it something you graduate into, or is it something you start out looking at depending on your funding level? Does that come into play?
Absolutely, and I think part of the debate is the modular versus monolithic. So anybody knowing, certainly in the CRM space, that we're broadly known as, the historic view of some of those old CRM systems, you have to buy 100% big bang of the whole solution. You may only use 10%, and you have 90% redundancy in the technology, which is a very antiquated model and one that we don't subscribe to. So for us, it's very much around buy where it makes sense, but we do give the tools in order to allow a build, to build differentiation, to build innovation, and to build unique processes that may be specific to your business. So I think the question that we find is that it depends on what layer of the architecture that you're trying to change. I don't think it's a binary, is it buy or is it build? So certainly if everyone knows the pace layer model from Gartner, so the systems of record, they don't change very often. So that's a commodity type buy. buy a policy admin system, buy a claims management system, buy a quote and rating engine. Why would you try to write that from scratch, from the bottom up? Peter mentioned that earlier. That seems crazy. In the systems of innovation, you want to standardize and lower the cost to serve. So you want some commonality there. So that starts to drive, again, probably a buy type decision. But at the very front end, where you want to build unique experiences, you probably want to build that uniqueness, that differentiation. So it depends on the architecture where you want to buy or build. And to your point around cost, certainly how we engage with our customers at Salesforce is that we take a very incremental, iterative approach. So our platform is modular, get the bits that you want and grow from that, rather than having to buy wholesale and a monolithic system of everything from day one.
Great, thank you. And Charlie, I know, you know, from your side of the fence, you guys use a little bit of software from third parties. Tell us what the reasoning and where did that journey begin? Did you, obviously, does funding come into play? Was it a preference? Tell us about your journey into how you progressed.
Yeah, I mean, my background, I had a manufacturing career where we did a lot of SAP, so, you know, a lot of bought in software. And then I had a SaaS career where we built and refactored a demand generation business called BrightTalk. And we rebuilt that 4 times. We built it in custom PHP. We then took it offshore. We then went to Drupal. We then built PHP Symfony. And then we finally ended up with WP Engine over about a 15-year period. So you can see, you know, neither was perfect. And you had to sort of come on this journey. And so I knew I wasn't going to build stuff from scratch. And then it was a question of, what kind of platform can I buy that has a lot of enterprise capabilities out the box, you know, ideally a lot of insurance archetypes that I can also extend around specific products or around specific customer experiences.
So is your build in that case, the recipe, so to speak, the ingredients used and then how you spin it into a recipe of tech? Or do you see the bits in between as where you build and focus, you know?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, you know, these platforms would be fully mature, and it really is a pure configuration, you know, with some customer experience. But as we know, you know, the customer experience is fairly tightly meshed with the front end code. So we have had to build, you know, both at the back end, we've had to build at the front end, and then over time, you know, as the platforms of the framework that we've been using mature, you know, we can end of life some of that and move to you know, less technical debt and a more standard set of data-driven configurations.
Can I just say, sorry?
Go on, jump in, Pete.
I was going to say, I think it's important though to remember what industry we're in as well, right? I think there's like insurance itself. There's products and there's products, right? When I first started in insurance, I always used to get asked about what the product is, and I'd start talking about technology, and it'd be no, what's the insurance product? And you kind of, and it took me ages to just decipher between when we're having product meetings and product meetings. And I think it's really important that when you look at the opportunity and the offer that insurance companies make and the service they deliver and the point of the product, it's not always about the tech. That, you know, the tech isn't the only value asset in that business. Sometimes, and Guy's completely right. You know, VCs look at different assets on the balance sheet, whether you've got a technology, your own build, but actually the delivery mechanism can be a collection of everything, but it's the product that you're selling or delivering to the customers at the end that needs the most imagination, I think. And I think you can spend so much time worrying about the tech stack and building it all yourself, and you forget about, you know, really concentrating on the product that you should be delivering at the front end. And I think that, you know, underwriters that we've spoken to previously in previous lives and now, like there's a severe, and I don't mean this in the wrong way, but there's a lack of imagination in what you're trying to achieve, right? Like insurance inherently needs to see stuff to believe it. And I think that when you're talking about building, it's quite, sometimes people, if they've been burnt buying, they build. If they've been burnt building, they buy, right? And I think that there's always seems to have to be this little bit of pain to realize that the other option was the one you should have gone for in the first place, right? And I feel that, but that doesn't take away from the real innovation that should be in the insurance products themselves, not necessarily the technology that puts it on a website. And I think that let other people take care of that part as much as they can, and then build on the APIs that they deliver to go and deliver a better customer journey and products at the front end would be my. It's an industry, very interesting industry. Having come from Martech previously, you know, that was all about like them. There's 2 products here that are very importantly distinguished.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, from my experience, insurance, I always say it's slow to move and quick to follow. So it's about getting that inflection point. And, you know, what Pete was mentioning there, we should make no mistake, Insurtech UK is an interesting example of broad church in the sector. We've got, you know, distributing companies like Bought by Many and New Life. And then we've got SaaS providers who can both work with those companies aforementioned and incumbents and you know, up tech them. You know, I think it's interesting. Most people probably haven't noticed, but I did cite the job titles at the start. And I think one of the most interesting panelists here is Matthew from New Life, because data ultimately, if it's the new oil and we're all in the business of tech and having a data edge, I want to know from Matt, I don't know about anyone else, but how does, you know, being ahead of data interact with the people who are building the tech? And, you know, surely when it comes to using this strategic asset, which is the data play, how engaged are you and how concerned are you by the tools used? Or is it, you know, as long as they produce for me, I'll take it, that's fine.
Well, so yeah, a lot of what I'm probably about to say is going to echo what a lot of people have said already, but the fact is we kind of sit across the spectrum. We're dealing in the life insurance business, which is a business that hasn't changed for the last 250 years. It's dealt with when you're dealing with your own policies, you're maybe making contact with your insurer once or twice a year at max, but we're trying to create a new kind of insurance that's sold and interacted with in a completely different way. So we do need a lot of data to support that, but at the same time, the kind of data is the new oil always throws me off a bit, because I don't want to picture myself as this like oil baron, but it's more of we're borrowing your data to give you the best experience that we can give you. We're going to try and create that win-win for you, where you are engaging in our gamified app. We are constantly giving you feedback. We're constantly giving you discounts or further benefits within the app itself. And we do need to find something at the moment that is going to serve all those needs for us. So a lot of it does come down to our own kind of traditional gap analysis, where if we build, what are the actual integration costs going to be? What's the cost of maintaining it? What's the cost of all the dev work? What's the cost of all the business analysis and scoping? But at the same time, buying to make it work with our kind of microservices. If we're shoving in a massive monolith, what are those integration costs going to be? How much integration is there going to be? How do we make sure that we're mirroring the same kind of data in all of our different systems? So it's a really critical point for us that we do get it right, but it's just that journey that we're on at the moment.
I guess I'm going to throw a bit of contention in here. I'm looking at Guy, Pete, and Charlie in particular, and Anthony will come to you afterwards on this. Surely building technology is a good thing because it creates an asset. I mean, Guy, was there ever a moment where, similar to Pete, you've had you know, a twinkle thinking, gosh, some of the stuff I'm building here is going to be useful to other people in the value chain? And out of the three of you, at what point did you start getting poked, or have you been poked by people in the sector who are saying, you know, we like what you're doing, how about you turn into this instead, and or give us access to this software? Guy, if you want to kick that off, and then Charlie and Pete can jump in and kind of, you know, spell that journey out and let us know if that's happened to them. I think that'd be really interesting.
Yeah, so we definitely have that. Well, mine and the tech design team, if you like, we have that at the back of our mind. The question we always ask is, could this platform be used by a third party? So we've set it up so that it's multi-tenant, it's completely API centric. You know, we've got open authentication mechanisms, all of the things that would make it a viable SaaS platform. It's not on our roadmap, it's not part of our business model, but I think it's a good design discipline, because when we launch into new countries, we are effectively supporting another organization. You know, we're supporting, you know, a company called Many Pets in Sweden, or it will be called Many Pets in Sweden next month. So, you know, we definitely have that, bear that in mind. I still haven't seen what I would consider to be like a proper API for insurance. I mean, maybe one of the other guys is about to correct me here, but I don't know anywhere I can go and, you know, create a sandbox account, use some tooling to build an insurance product, and then hit an API through Postman, you know, to rate that product or trade that product within a couple of hours. And I think that's missing from insurance, because you can get it in payments, you can get it everywhere else. And so, you know, if that had existed before we started the build process, that probably would have swayed me much more towards the buy, or in fact, not buy. Buy is the wrong answer, it's subscribe, right? And if that had existed, I would have been in a very different position today, and we wouldn't be building our own version of that API.
Pete?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think I think what you're saying is right. I think with any of these things, again, it's the sum of the ingredients. You mentioned ingredients earlier, and I had this thing in my head, right? You could give, you know, two different people the same ingredients, and they could come up with two different meals, right? I think that if you look at the way that people actually use technology, is the implementation play. And I think, and build and buy is very decisive, right? Do you build or do you buy? The truth is, everyone does both, right? Even, you know, we consume, we've not got your own servers or your own, you know, you are buying stuff to collate and put together to deliver your own products. And so, you know, you're not going to build necessarily an email automation marketing platform if your focus is on distributing insurance products. Why would you spend all that money to do that and not focus on something more core to your product? So I think the ancillary elements is certainly an important bit, where if you can get the core right, the connectivity of the industry and other platforms that aren't necessarily built for insurance, that's the thing that we've enjoyed doing. You know, we've just gone into the app exchange in Salesforce because for the purpose that you mentioned about startups, to make it affordable effectively. Because why would you want to start from scratch every time if you want to get something launched? And I think that the connectivity to third-party products, because insurance is so unique, to be able to use something like Braze or Salesforce Marketing Cloud, you need insurance components in there because it needs that data points to fuel it. And I think that you build those parts and then let everyone else do the bits that they're really good at is the best outcome, I think, that the industry can have. So it is a build and buy in any industry, I think.
And Charlie, are Insurtechs listening to you know, that gauntlet that Guy's thrown down? I mean, is there any thinking your end about what open insurance and open APIs looks like? I mean, it seems to me like the panel so far is very resoundingly breaking the binary of build or buy and saying when to build and when to buy is probably the key strategic question. So how does that evolve on for you guys, and how open will Azure be in the future, if at all?
Yeah, no, it's, you know, APIs and, you know, EDI and all the rest of it over a long period of time has proved problematic, you know, largely around, you know, the dynamics of customer retention and, you know, and access to risks. It does make it a difficult market to have that sort of pure exchange. Clearly, obviously, the price comparison sites have done well around price, but not necessarily around product. I mean, I think for us, you do have to set a strategy. Sure, you have, you know, a period of time when you get going, you know, like Pete, they started out in one direction and then shifted gears to a more successful future. I mean, at the most basic, you know, you're going to call the venture partner or you're going to call the private equity investor. You got to call one or the other. And if your pitch is wrong, now we were very clear, we're going to be an insurance company, we're an underwriter, you know, we're an MGA. Technology drives the business strategy. We may, you know, do some services to sort of help fund the business while we're starting, and we have done. But no, we're very clear. You know, we're an insurance company. We're going to be valued on insurance metrics. We're going to use technology to scale the business as aggressively as we can. And I think everyone has got to settle on a strategy and then get behind it.
And Anthony, let's go to Salesforce here. I think we haven't mentioned yet the opportunity of working with a company like you guys. You're a Jupiter in the tech world, and I think there's a venture element to what Salesforce do. Is it simply good business to look at Salesforce? I know that at Worry and Peace, we're looking at, you know, you as a distributor potentially of software that we sell. So, you know, share a little bit about that. How is Salesforce actually, you know, a savvy thing to engage with, and, you know, often buying software off the shelf and doing something different with it? Does that put you on the radar? Is that an edge that someone outside of sector is going to look at and say, hang on a minute, I hadn't thought of this use case, and maybe Insurtech's more interest than I think it is?
Yeah, well, there's certainly a nuance just on the buy bit. So insurance companies, when they look to buy, do they go down the best of breed route and try to string together the best of every type of technology? And that comes with a cost and a responsibility and a total cost of ownership eventually. And that also takes away from an opportunity cost a lot of the resources in the IT department to keep the lights on, less time to do innovation. So you've got the best of breed approach, but you've also got the platform approach. So, and it's been talked about here as well, is there a technology set that you can use that you can tap into third-party solutions, but also offer some of those accelerators that are aligned to the insurance industry? And that's certainly the approach that we've taken at Salesforce. So We have our core offerings around sales, service, marketing, but we've also now created the vertical solutions around financial services cloud, and specifically insurance capability. So that gives the accelerators. But we know it's a diverse and it's a federated world that we now live in. And so we also have our platform play as well. You can build your own capabilities and solutions, but have the speed to value in terms of accessing the Salesforce functionality and data. And you also have the App Exchange, where we have over 4,500 partners that create their own solutions. Some are free, some are monetized, that quickly integrate into our platform. So we've got a foot in both camps, really. And if you think about Salesforce itself, we've looked at the insurance market. We were never going to build a policy admin system or a claims management system from the ground up. So we decided to buy, and we acquired Velocity to fulfill those systems of record things. But where we feel that we have the technology to build unique differentiating experiences, that's where we push out things like communities, etc. So we've got a foot in both camps, and I think it's certainly around now a platform play and being able to connect to smaller solutions and not necessarily doing everything in one platform. And we recognize that, and hence why the App Exchange is a very popular platform for looking for those point solutions.
Matthew, does the platform being used have an influence when it comes to trust and the portability of data as well, from where you sit on the fence? If you hear the team talking about using a certain platform, how much are you going to engage with those tools if they have some of the things that are relevant to your part of the business involved? And do you even consider, hang on a minute, Charlie's talked about technical debt, but having important aspects of the business, which is the way the data operates, etc., stuck within certain platforms, is that a factor for people like ULife? What do you think of that side?
I mean, yeah, it's a massive factor for us at ULife. Everything needs to run in kind of absolute real time. We need to be giving our people immediate feedback on how they're doing in our game, in the app. But then also there's the other side of things with my kind of data protection hat on. What are the concerns when we need to write this privacy notice about all these various different apps and other services that we need to hook into when we're talking about third-party solutions or third-party processing and other things like that? It's a massive concern for us because we are dealing with an unusual amount more data when it comes to a life insurance policy because of the extra services that we provide. So, yeah.
Fantastic. And Pete, Guy, I'm just interested again. I want to go back to this point of we started off calling it build versus buy. So let's be honest, you both built, and both of those builds have gone in different directions. Pete, at what point did it dawn on you that the direction of effectively selling your software was the right way to go? And Guy, along the route, how many wobbles have you had in order to look at third-party tools when your team have been pulling a late shift and doing it in-house? I'm just interested in hearing those two perspectives and then flipping that across to Charlie again afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, when we were getting more inquiries about the tech platform we used and policy sales, it became quite evident which way we should go with it, to be honest. So we weren't selling tons and tons of policies at that point, but we were getting so many people interested in how we'd use data to drive down the question set and improve the customer journeys. And I'm not a B2C specialist, I'm a B2B specialist. So that's kind of it. It was crazy we went that route in the first place, if I'm honest, given the skill sets that we had. But ultimately, that's kind of where we ended up. And I think, and to Guy's point, I think it was built with that in mind always. Whether it was like explicitly said, I always kind of used to speak to our CTO about it and sort of say, look, I'm sure someday someone's going to want to use this as well. And there's always a dual business plan in any entrepreneur's head, I think, because at some point you're never going to get a smooth road. So you need to work, you never shut doors in any business I've owned. So yeah, that's kind of where it got to. And then from there, to be honest, once we'd made the decision, it was actually a really enjoyable process. We gave home life to someone that knows how to distribute insurance, and that thing's flown. And now we're getting to sell our technology platform in a much more, in a much more business usual way for us. We know no regulation involved either. So we managed to get rid of the cost of regulation as well, which was a blessing.
What do you think about that, Guy? Yeah,
so from us, you asked about wobbles. So I guess because we launched our first book of business, the cat and dog stuff, on IBA's IB Suite, we kind of always had that backup. And to be honest, I had a pretty open conversation with IBA's CTO and said, you know, we need to build this asset for ourselves, but like, we know if we suddenly find we've bitten off more than we can chew, we'll come back and talk to you about helping us out, you know. So we kind of had an exit strategy if we felt, you know, we were ever getting in too deep. Fortunately, it turned out not to be. I'd say the other thing is that we do actually buy quite a lot. So, you know, we use Stripe billing to manage subscriptions, Auth0 for login and registration. We use Segment for customer data platform. We use Algolia for, you know, static data lookups. So we've really only built like the insurance bit right in the middle, and a whole bunch of stuff that you would get with a platform, if you like. I'm not pretty sure what that means anymore, the concept of a platform, you know. We don't do that, right? We use all the best SaaS services that are out there for all of that core infrastructure stuff. Exactly. You know, so we're just not building any of that complicated stuff that we know somebody can do a better job of than us. You know, we're building the bits that differentiate us in the middle, the insurance bits, if you like. And actually, this is where I kind of disagree with Gartner's, you know, your system of record. I think, you know, if we're going to innovate, it should be in policies and it should be in claims. And so those are the things that we should be not buying, because that's the bit that this industry needs to innovate in, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can't help but think perhaps, you know, Insurtech itself is a growing ecosystem. I think 2021 is looking really up for the ecosystem. But one thing's really notable from my perspective, and Charlie, I don't know where you would sit on this, but are Insurtechs working with each other enough? I mean, I know there are a few startups, you know, looking to engage. Canopy have recently been working with 2 or 3 selling retailers. I'm talking to Claim Technology about their kind of Zapier of insurance API model. Charlie, how much appetite is there from your perspective to look at, if you were to, as Guy was saying, look for best in class, to pitch that out to the ecosystem and really look within the community? And are you seeing enough of that? And how do we maybe get more as well, so that, you know, the whole system prospers?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And obviously depends which geography and which classes, and then who's built a unique capability. You know, I think there is a, you know, strategy that people have to pick, which says we're going to go after this bit because it's big enough and we can be different enough and we'll organize around it. And that can be hard then to sort of say, well, how does that fit into the value chain? But, you know, the Consiruses of this world, if we ever get to, you know, cargo as an MGA, of course, you know, they're, you know, well-known example who've done a terrific job of, you know, owning all the data, you know, RMS-like, so that it's a pretty compelling proposition. And the fact that more of our underwriting's done on their platform for that product doesn't bother me at all. You know, as long as I've got my regulatory auditable products, that I'm very happy. You know, I think everything does come back down to the basic business requirements. It is 101 with technology. And if you're a large, you know, top 50 insurer, you're going to have a very different buy strategy, where you're going to go with one of the big people who you're going to pay, you know, 10 or 20 million dollars a year to. Or if you're in a B2C on demand, you know, clearly you're going to pick a different buy decision. So it does absolutely come back to what's the strategy, what are you trying to do, and then what's the best set of tools to hit that.
And that's important as well, right? I think if you look at, again, within this industry, there's so many industries, right? And everything's so different, or every line of insurance is different, and every claims process is different. So, you know, there is an element of like, I think, having the continuity of parts of your platform or system, but then you have to sort of build some points of differentiation, otherwise everyone would be doing the same. So I think that, but when we talk about insurance, it's so broad, right? Like, I mean, you can't, like, it's not something you can just talk about. It's, you know, you have to break it down into, you know, if you're saying Consirus and you're looking at cargo, like that in itself, I mean, how big an industry is that? You know, like, it's just, there's so many industries within the word insurance that, you know, I think there's never going to be one solution that fits all. So therefore, the ecosystem play, for me, certainly is the only route to true success here.
Yeah, and without banging the drum of the ecosystem, you know, that's a good thing about having an association like this is, you know, a lot of the startups who we work with together probably don't know what they've got a lot of the time when they've built things. So, you know, make sure you're engaging. That's a quick first recap.
Yeah, I was going to say, I need to speak to Guy after this about some of the things that he's doing. But just going off the back of some of what's been said, I think it's a real shame that the insurance industry does not have the same concept as open banking. We don't have any of that kind of parity between the different products that we're producing and us as a managing general agent working with carriers and reinsurers. It's a minefield trying to work out how we can mix all of the data together from the different entities. So something like that would be great, and I'm constantly racking my mind as to why that is not the case, or why are we not moving towards something like that.
We're trying. I mean, you know, the open insurance issue is a case of, without digressing too much, do we look at what open banking did and try and mirror and replicate, or do we start from scratch? And actually, this entire debate is really leveling in on APIs and the, you know, how you navigate the recipe of build or buy. I mean, I guess my challenge there, I've obviously just asked and said, you know, should we be working more together as startups? But Anthony, should the insurers really be throwing much more weight behind what this ecosystem's doing and really grow that base? Because as you've just heard, you know, opportunity with every startup when they do go out building with high ambition.
Yeah.
Ironically, the lucky draw is that they've built something useful to other people, and there's that 2-for-1 benefit for every buck spent.
Well, having worked at several big insurers and being on the other side of the fence from a big carrier insurer incumbent, there are different aspects that come into play. One, the big insurers or carriers, they lack the capacity or the ability to do innovation. And that's where Insurtechs have a really great value proposition to big insurers to help them deliver the innovation that they can't deliver internally. And they're the conversations that we're also having with the insurance companies, that they're so tied up in the spaghetti that's stuck together with super glue that is their business of processes, data and systems, that they don't have that breathing space to do innovation. So I think that's where they look outside, and we can see that with certainly Insurtechs like Laka, who Zurich have put money into, etc. And a lot of the big insurers are now investing in Insurtechs because they can't do that innovation themselves. And part of that internal lack of innovation in insurance is there's partly to do with the skepticism of the leadership around certainly digital and transformation. Insurance hasn't changed for 350 years, so why do we need to change now type of mindset. There's usually a lack of vision, so there's certainly a short-term win approach rather than the long-term win, long-term gain. And so they very much deliver projects rather than products or capabilities. So that also lends itself to building tactical point solutions and not really innovating and thinking how that affects their customers or their brokers, etc. So I think the challenge that the insurance industry has is the lack of innovation inside. Insurtechs have a fantastic chance to play in that, and we see the value in that, and bring in those Insurtechs together and those industry solutions together in a marketplace where people can monetize their ideas, and people can take those benefits of that thinking already of being done. But certainly insurance companies also lack in innovation, and on our app exchange we don't see any of the big insurers with solutions that they've put on there, because there is a level of defensiveness and protectionism also, that their IPR is their IPR, and although it may be really useful and they could probably make a load of money if they monetize those ideas and put them out on the marketplace, they're too protective to share them in the first place. So that's where we're also seeing quite a closed community, certainly in the big insurers.
Sure, and as Insurtech goes, you know, if you want something done, as Matthew was saying, maybe open insurance, we need to do it ourselves. And we've got a couple of great questions popped in, so sorry for the delays on those that have asked. I'm going to throw this one to Pete and Guy straight away. What are your views on no-code and low-code platforms as they provide the opportunity to both build and buy? Who wants to go?
Go. No, go.
Okay, so I've dabbled a lot with no-code and low-code, and always come up disappointed. Always found the edges that I just, you know, couldn't, you know, butted up against the edges too soon. I do think there's space for this, and I do think it will come from AWS or GCP. I've got GWP on the brain. Where, you know, they've got the underlying services and putting some sort of glue on top of that. So something that links up lambdas with step functions in AWS would be absolutely amazing. So I'm waiting for that to appear. I haven't seen one that we've wanted to get into. I actually think that Salesforce is a little bit in this space, right? It's a little bit like a sort of a platform where you glue a bunch of services together and you get the kind of workflow and customer data record inside the platform. So, you know, it is emerging, and there's lots of models. It just hasn't quite got there for me yet.
Yeah, I think for me, it's a good marketing. It's good wording, right? I mean, you know, no code, low code is for me. Sometimes the products are too complex to be able to go down that granular on these sorts of things, and I think that. So there's always it's a good conversational point, and I think it reads well on a website, but it doesn't always work well in practice.
Fantastic. And another great question's popped in. I won't name the question askers just in case I haven't specifically heard that they're happy with that. But there's a question here really plays to the Peter Thiel kind of 0 to 1 thing. If we focus on core systems and everyone's kind of using the same thing, is there a risk that there's, you know, monopoly profits on the table for certain providers? And it's been cited here that that's happening in places like the cat sector. I would be devil's advocate to this and also challenge you to you know, give another view. Isn't that a good thing? You know, Peter Thiel's belief 0 to 1 is about creating unicorns. Do we want some of the Insurtechs to dominate a space, or is that really not an issue? Let's kind of go with Charlie first on that and see what he thinks.
I think you know, the insurance market is hugely competitive. You can see that by the number of players. You know, they've been investigated multiple times and cleared, and you know, and it's been looked at. This generates a lot of revenues for governments around the world. So there's a lot of there is a lot of attention on it. I don't think anyone has really seen any kind of, you know, 1 or 0 economics around insurance. You know, arguably it's the opposite. You know, look at the level of funding into the ecosystem, into Insurtechs. There's a ton of money going into lots of companies. You know, it's not just 1 or 2 companies. Now there are businesses that are getting through the other side with, you know, with $1 billion plus valuations, but there's, you know, thousands of companies you know, in the space, as well as, you know, thousands of insurance companies in the space. So I wouldn't say that's likely to happen anytime soon.
It goes back to my point about it being too big, right? It's too big and too fractured, and to have one owner of anything in insurance for me. It's not. You know, I sat on a panel once about there will be the Uber moment in insurance, and it was like, no, it's just it's too big, right? It's too, again, each vertical is an industry in itself. You can't have one person owning everything for the sheer risk, right? Like the sheer risk on that alone would be too big. But if you're building unicorns in an industry that turns over trillions, well, you know, they're still small in comparison, right?
Yeah, and I think this what's resonating coming out of this for me. Sorry for these you know, interval recaps everyone's suffering, but I like the idea of collaborations coming through. And Matthew, I want to go back to you a little bit. You know, second to that question was mentioned, and you know, an open platform was cited. I've been, you know, really falling into a rabbit hole on a blockchain of blockchains called Polkadot, and I'm really interested, Matthew, what you think about the collaboration piece. You mentioned open insurance. You know, are you looking at this, and are you pushing it internally for the kind of blockchain approach to finally get use cases where there's collaboration in store instead of just choice of build buy?
So less on the blockchain side of things. I think blockchain is very applicable to certain use cases for us. It might be maybe on some of the more complex claims cases. It doesn't really fit that well into what we're currently producing on the life side of things. But we have our gamified app, as I've already mentioned quite a few times, but within that app you've got equipment, and as you buy different kinds of life insurance policies at the moment, you get more equipment or more armor, and that increases your earn rate, and you can earn more from our in-app currency Ucoin, and you can exchange that for rewards in-app. But the idea is to have this ecosystem for insurance within your own little world with your avatar, and as you bolt on different kinds of insurance, you then increase that earn rate, and so on, so on, so on, until you're earning loads and getting loads back for engaging in your kind of financial well-being. So it's not something we're at yet, but we've got the slots there. We've got our kind of avatar there in the middle of the screen, and it's about how do we fill up those slots, or how do we give people the products, or how do we even test potential products that people could bolt on to their avatars.
I'm so sorry, by the way, to the team at ULife. I've clearly triggered a load of crypto enthusiasts tapping you all about Ucoin. I guess this is a question for Guy and Charlie, respectively, from one of the guests on the webinar today. what do you consider yourself? I think I know the answer to this before I ask it, but do you consider yourselves primary an insurer more than you do tech company, or is that a cliched question? You know, is the answer obvious? Guy, do you want to kick off on that question?
I mean, technically, we're not a primary risk carrier. We're, you know, 100% underwritten. So from that perspective, we are a tech and distribution business. Certainly from raising capital in the market, being an Insurtech is the right answer.
Fantastic. I mean, for sure. And I guess that's another question is where you want to strategically end up. Maybe building helps if you ever do become a primary or have that as an option on the table. Charlie, what do you think about that? Obviously, you're similar. You have delegated.
Yeah, we're a regulated MGA. You know, we're an underwriting business. We're a Lloyd's cover holder, and you know that drives our business. You know, we try and win 20% of the quotes that we generate, you know, so that kind of tells you all about the dynamic of risk selection and great underwriting, and that's what the tech is subservient to. That's what the tech's got to do.
And Anthony, I want to go into, obviously the goal of a lot of funded startups is to make a return for their investors. So you know, let's tackle a big elephant in the room on this. Is the build versus buy debate relevant to your exit plan and how you navigate that journey? And how you put yourself in a certain shop window? Does that come into play? You mentioned, obviously, you mentioned that Salesforce bought something, and the first thing I was thinking was they probably literally bought that company. So does that come into play as well from the grassroots of Insurtech upwards, depending on where you want to get to? And if you want to get to an IPO, is it better to start doing more building early and buy when convenient, so that you become either a useful exit on routes or have much more monopoly power, has been asked down the line?
It's one of those depend type answers, I'm afraid. If you come out with such a unique idea and you can build it yourself, you can make your billions from that. And if you think about WhatsApp, when that went IPO, and there was only 50 people in the organization at the time when they sold it. So, you know, you don't need to be a big company to make a lot of money. And so I think if you've got the right idea, you can sustain a build approach all the way up to IPO and making your riches. But then in other cases where you need to scale, so it's low return of investments on each thing that you sell, each product that you offer, each service that you deliver, then you need to scale. And then that becomes more of a repeatable model of the things that you're creating and delivering, and that requires more stability, and that probably aligns more to a buy type conversation in terms of buying in those commodity or those core capabilities that allow you to get to that scale quicker. I'm trying to do that from a build perspective, as well as trying to innovate. Now we deliver 450 plus new features and functions every year through our platform, through our 3 innovative releases. Trying to do that when you're building and maintaining that level of innovation and that research and development is difficult while you're still also trying to grow a business. So I think there's a balance between managing your cost base, but having a growth strategy and trying to find that sweet spot in the middle, which may mean, again, that you'll do a bit of buy and a bit of build. But there are definitely those unicorns or those unique ideas out there that have been a full build and made their billions from it, but they are quite an exception.
If you look at, but there's also the other opportunity, right? You look at Viva Systems and Encino, right? They're both built on Salesforce, and you know, one's so Viva's valued at $42 billion on the market, and Encino's $7 billion, and they're all built on Salesforce. Would they be considered build or buys, right? Like at the end of the day, you don't need to. You know, they're delivering a service on a platform, which I think is the key here. They're differentiated, but you know, they're delivering a service that no one else was, but utilizing the core principles of something that's already been built. So I think that's it's great value there.
That's a great point. And there's, as you've mentioned, Pete, a few times, there's so many components to insurance. Each tactical layer of that, you've got to kind of consider where on the ladder you want to pitch. There's been an interesting kind of red team question, which I think, Ellie, by the way, if we've got time, give me a wave when it's coming to the end of time. But this question's a bit more red team, and I think there'll be some strong views on this. How do insurtechs collaborate to solve some of the problems when insurers have so much more data that maybe they are or aren't using, and as Anthony's pointed out, maybe quite guarded about? How are they actually collaborating right now? how can they collaborate more? And is that actually a problem? Or as Guy would probably say, and ULife would probably say, you know, we're making our own data. Who wants to kind of take first position on that question?
They need to start getting away from just using consultancies to do work for them, and actually use people that can actually deliver value from the technology side of it to actually do it. I can tell you what your problems are, but if you can't provide me a solution, what's the point, right? And I think that's been going on for far too long. I think they far too long people have been told what their problems are or what they should do with their data. No one ever gives it. They never go to places that could actually help them with their data, and that's the key for me. So, Guy, can Insurtech use the Valley of Doom that consultants use and be that new kind of helper?
So, like, I guess I'm kind of struggling a little bit to figure out what almost what the question here is. What is it we're collaborating on? You know, like a data exchange standard would probably be handy for, you know, the kind of data processing pipeline as, you know, you're pushing services out to other parts of the industry. And I guess it would be good for consumers in terms of switching policies between companies. But I'm not sure that there's a huge amount more that needs, like, I'm not quite sure what a greater collaboration there drives. You know, a much more interesting collaboration project that I think that this industry or the country could do is like Sweden and Denmark both have some form of bank-driven sign-on capability. They have Bank ID in Sweden, and I don't know what it's called in Denmark. You know, collaborations like that where we're putting functionality out there that everybody could use would be a really interesting thing to do. So if anyone wants to do the UK Fin ID, then I'll be up.
There you go, you heard it here first. Charlie, what's your take on that question?
Yeah, I mean, there are obvious collaborations just within your own value chain. You know, we use third-party data for our property underwriting. It's a startup data company that works well. You know, we work with third-party data companies in the US with commercial data, so that's kind of easy. You know, we know a lot of each other within the UK Insurtech community, and a lot of times we're sharing ideas. It's not always obvious though as to how you can drive revenues more than ideas to each other, even with goodwill. Just because people do pick these opportunities on the map that they go after, and there may not be much specific to collaborate on, and therefore you are left collaborating with the big insurers who are going to provide capacity. We distribute through brokers, and that's where a lot of our partnership energy goes, because that's where the money's going to be.
And Pete, I guess from your perspective, and Matthew, I'd love to get your take on this too. I know you're delegated as well. Who is it, if you are looking to build for the sector, who's the best buyer? Is it MGAs or is it carriers?
Oh, for us, I mean, from my prospect list, it's MGAs, brokers, and scheme specialists, and sort of on the small to mid tier, because I think once it gets above that, like you do have, the velocity product is for me sort of above that layer. It's not an entry price product, and that's kind of where we sort of fill that gap. We kind of want to give people quick innovation, either as a re-platform, for want of a better word, or actually from a startup perspective, or even a breakout. I think there's nowhere near enough large insurance companies just launch new products to test them in the market. They go through these two words which cripple most sellers in this market, and business case. Like, I need a business case. So no one wants to write a business case. It's too long, too complicated. Just launch it, see what happens, and stop it if it's not working. Like, just get it to a point of proof of concepts. And I know insurance is regulated, and you don't want to be selling policies willy-nilly, but even if you just got it to the point of launch and decided you didn't want to do it, the business case creation process for me in large insurers does slow innovation incredibly. If there's not a fully fledged business plan, I've built companies on less planning than they would launch one line of product, to be fair.
Yeah, that's a really strong point. And Matthew, I'm just interested in the context from ULife's perspective. You're crushing it, getting loads of distribution for your specialist initial launch product, and carriers start to come to you and say, hey, we love the idea of this. Does that give you an opportunity to maybe look at, as Pete's described, rapid deployment with partners like Aventis and other people in the market, or is that much more of a head scratch for someone like ULife, or does it get it straight no? Is it like we're building the build versus buy in our vertical and that's kind of it, or is that a temptation to expand a little bit when it's easier to do so?
There's definitely the temptation there. There is also the fact that obviously we are sitting as a managing general agent, so we have built our products with the sign-off and structures of the carrier or the underwriter. So it is quite difficult. And I think going back to the question that was asked before, there's definitely a lot of value that could come to us from understanding more around historic claims and validation of any kind of insurance fraud or anything like that. But I can't really see a way for us amongst the kind of Insurtech companies to be sharing that kind of information, because that's the kind of stuff we need to turn into our IP. If we're looking at something like dynamic and underwriting on the life insurance side of things, we need 3+ years of claims history. We need many, many more years of actual mortality information, and we need to do studies and a lot of that kind of academic research that has to go into that side of things to really change how the market works, is going to become our IP. So it's very difficult for us to find the right synergies in and amongst the other players.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you. I mean, one thing that just was baking my brain was the common denominator here for the distributing panelists is that you've all got delegated authority of some kind. And as Pete was saying, given the industry's not necessarily inertia, but it's painstaking focus on having business cases and lots of compliance, how much does the insurer themselves have an effect on the tech you use? So is this question actually not ours to answer? Because we've all got someone up the supply chain that's providing paper. And I guess, Anthony, if once the panelists have had a chat on that, what's your perspective? Is Salesforce effectively something that's pushed down to new propositions that insurers want to work with? How does that dynamic work between who's paying the claims and who's doing the innovating? Let's start with Charlie, I think, on that one. That would be a great start.
Yeah, no, the big carriers absolutely do not dictate the tech. They don't really know what you should be using. They know what they've always bought because they've always bought it, and if they move to a new shop, they use what they previously used, and that's a dynamic that's gone on for far too long. But no, we're and a number of MGAs are positioning themselves as tech-enabled MGAs. Absolutely, that's our proprietary value add to the puzzle, and we're doing things that they can't do, which is part of the attraction.
I think that on a different note, I think that some binders should be placed with technology, because when someone places a binder with someone and they were able to keep that distribution, if it goes like a one-to-many rule, getting the consistency of that data back. The most astonishing thing for me when I come into this industry was that no two bordereaux are the same. I mean, like it's staggering, right? So if you've got every front end distribution for your binder going through the same interface at the front, you're going to get consistency of data, real-time information on what's on risk, instead of like 90 days later when you've rekeyed the spreadsheet 15 times and a couple of human errors thrown in, see where you land. Like the data passing in this industry from customer to carrier, I think it could be vastly improved by Insurtechs and by carriers. Not dictating which technology, but at least explaining the rationale behind why it would be better if you used X, Y, and Z than going and doing it yourself.
Absolutely, lots of nods.
And you might get underwriting, you might get your capacity back as well.
Fantastic. What do you think, Guy?
Yeah, so we are audited by the carrier, but there's no sort of technology dictation. We have some sort of UAT of our systems by them when new features or new systems are released, but it's entirely up to us how that's delivered.
Fantastic, and I'm being poked by the voice from above saying that we are almost at the end of time, but I'm going to squeeze one more question in because that's the kind of guy I am. Anthony, since you're our main partner on this and triggered the conversation, I want you to ask each of the panelists one last question. So sorry to put you on the spot, but this is how we entrepreneurs roll.
Who's going to win, Biden or Trump? No, I better not go into that question. Quick question: do you what area of technology do you think will have the most impact to the industry moving forward? And I mean that, is it AI? Is it the automation of the middle office? What do you think individually is the biggest technical or technology thing that can make the biggest change to the industry?
Great question. Matthew, let's kick off with you.
It's an easy out to say machine learning and AI, definitely. But obviously that's what I'm focused on at the moment. I think there is a lot of back office automation side of things. Also, we're going through at the moment. This is our build versus buy debate. It's if we are an Insurtech and we're scaling large and we are growing exponentially, buying one of these back office systems and a team of 10, 20, however many operations managers, is it actually necessary, or can we build the tech to support I think in some industries it's called RPA, robotics and process automation, but in us it's just building good code and building good backends that automates all the unnecessary human processes and gives people the capacity to do more that they need to be doing.
Guy,
I'll give two answers. I think once the industry figures out how to cross-sell, it will make a lot more money. I think it still staggers me that the average policy per customer in any of these things, and they're called policy holders, not customers. So even take tech out of it, once you start addressing your customers as customers and not policy holders, I think you'll see a big change in income. And then, to be fair, claims naturally, you know, if you manage the risk on that side, that's where all the money's made, right? On making sure the claims are correct.
okay.
Yeah, I think I obviously agree with both Peter and Matt, but I definitely agree with Matt that, you know, I'd like to say AI and ML, but there's so much automation that we could do that doesn't require AI and ML yet, that, you know, we could get through that. Even us with our own tech and, you know, a relatively young organization, we still have operational overheads that we desperately need to automate away, you know, and not just for managing our costs, but also just for speeding up our responsiveness to our customers. So yeah, I think, you know, this continued automation, continued bringing of parts of the life cycle online. We're probably 65% of our customer interaction and the life cycle is online. There's absolutely no reason that can't be 100. And like, it's somewhat sad, because I think I've been at conferences when you actually went to them 15 years ago and people were still giving.
And we lost Guy there. You're on mute there, Guy. Give us the last point there. Sorry, we lost you.
No, I was just saying that, you know, it's that has been the same answer for a very, very long time now. But you know, getting these customer processes the customer processes automated and the customer interactions entirely online, you know, we still haven't achieved that yet. And you know, and we don't have the legacy that most of the industry does to fight.
Fantastic. And Charlie, all of the above plus any extras?
Yeah, I mean, it's clearly the customer experiences that solve important problems. You know, if you look at the retail world, you know, we're back where they were 20 years ago. You know, apart from a few notable exceptions around the industry, you know, most of the stuff is still being sold off from the high street and in supermarkets, and you know, we have not put this in a digital place where people can easily buy stuff, and we just got to work on those customer experiences in trusted ways.
A great set of answers. And look, we're at the end of the journey here. I think we're 4 minutes over, which in itself is a good lesson for Insurtechs. It always takes longer than you think. But I'd like to thank all the panelists today and Insurtech UK for organising it. And of course, the 3 or 4 pages of people that have come and watched. It's been really great seeing everyone nodding away and engaging. I think I've seen a few cheerleaders as well, which is fantastic. So everyone's really raving about Insurtech. If you're not already tuning in, don't forget, if you remember, the AGM is this afternoon. Forget about Trump Biden for the moment. Democracy is in action with 9 spots vied for by 11 people. And honestly, I've heard some of the early exit polls. It's dramatic stuff. So either way, thanks so much for coming. Hope you enjoyed it. And we'll look forward to the team at HQ sharing the content after today. Bye, everyone.